Let's go live to Sky News Asia correspondent Brent O'Halloran now. Brent, how has China responded to the downing of this balloon?
Yeah, no official response yet regarding the balloon shot down near Alaska, though we don't know whether that's a Chinese balloon or much other information about that one. The US only provides scant details this morning. The Chinese Foreign Ministry, of course, denounced how the US handled the one shot down last weekend off the coast of South Carolina. China denies it was a spy balloon. It also rejects the Pentagon's accusation that China has a fleet of spy balloons over multiple continents. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that this is all part of what it describes as a US information war against China. Chinese social media site Weibo is awash with balloon memes joking about the fact that a F-22 was needed to take down what some users joked was just a Lunar New Year decoration. There's also a lot of commentary, Tim, highlighting a perceived hypocrisy from the US. The United States carried out around 600 surveillance flights off China's coast in 2022, and as Politico reported last year, the US has its own fleet of spy balloons. But I do think there's a great deal of concern in China about how this very hawkish anti-China US Congress will use this episode to further strangle Beijing. Remember, the US recently was granted access to 4 more military bases in the Philippines, adding to the 5 others it has there, as well as the 7 in Japan and 15 in South Korea. The Biden administration also enacted severe, and some would argue in China, illegal trade restrictions meant to limit China's ability to create microchips. And the US House of Reps voted to denounce China over this first balloon incident. There are fears it will soon go further, Tim.
What are US officials hoping to gain from analysing what they've brought down?
Yeah, it's understood they're trying to understand how it worked, exactly where it went, and what sort of information it gathered and how it relayed that information back to China. Of course, there's concern that the balloon spent some time over intercontinental ballistic missile sites, nuclear sites in the continental US. The investigation is in its early stages. Few details have been released regarding their findings so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, has China responded to Australia's plan to remove Chinese security systems from government buildings?
Yeah, of course, China's not too happy with this move to remove these cameras. Its argument is that Australia is discriminating against Chinese enterprises. The US and other Western companies are routinely found to surreptitiously collate data, China argues, and in some of those cases sharing that data with government agencies. But that's not, as again China argues, treated in the same way that these Chinese companies have been treated. Take a listen to how the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson responded earlier this week.
We oppose any misguided approach that generalises the concept of national security and abuses state power to discriminate against Chinese enterprises. We hope that Australia will provide a fair, just and non-discriminatory environment for the normal operation of Chinese enterprises.
Tim, there's also commentary from those in China suggesting Senator James Patterson's claims are baseless, that he hasn't actually provided concrete proof for his claims, that the Chinese government is somehow using these devices to spy on Australians, and that he's merely drumming up anti-Chinese sentiment for his own political ends. From what I see in commentary in Chinese media outlets and elsewhere, there's a bit of cynicism in China too about the timing of all this, just as the Labor government in Australia is making inroads in improving relations with China. This saga comes to light.
Yeah, and just on that point, what's your general feel, the overall feel of this relationship improving between Australia and China, and particularly the work done by Penny Wong since the government did come into power?
Yeah, she has done a fair bit of work, and she's got a fair bit of work ahead of her, I would argue, Tim. But I think there's popular consensus that she and the government in Australia as a whole has done pretty well in repairing what was, described as a frozen relationship. It's clear that the Chinese have responded well to the fact that she and the Labor government isn't denouncing Chinese actions in the public as frequently, and that generally they've been pretty measured in their rhetoric. That probably is a large reason why Australian officials have managed to secure meetings with Chinese counterparts in recent months, and some of the successes they've seen in scaling back some of the $20 billion worth of sanctions on Australian goods. The first shipment of Australian coal, incidentally, in more than 2 years was unloaded in the Chinese province of Guangdong this week, and according to the Australian newspaper, the Chinese Commerce Ministry is now willing to discuss the removal of tariffs on Australian wine, Tim, so that's some more positive news on that front.
Oh, absolutely. Now, what about this relationship between China and Russia? It hasn't always been a rosy relationship. I think it's important to remember the history here. They share a large border.
Yeah, no, it's scholars of history will be sure appreciate the tenuous relationship that's had over the years, but we're more than 1 year on since Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping declared their friendship has no limits, and that statement, of course, was delivered before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and this relationship has certainly endured its challenges since. It's clear China is looking to improve its relationship with the West. It's more motivated in that respect than Russia. It was China, of course, who asked for Antony Blinken to visit Beijing and meet with the Chinese president, which would have been quite a rare thing to occur. That visit, of course, was cancelled due to this balloon saga. So I guess you could say that China in this China-Russia relationship is looking more outward than, of course, Russia is, given the sanctions. But both, I guess, hold the view that it is important to work together and with other nations, including the BRICS nations, to challenge what they see as a US hegemony.
Finally, Brent, obviously we're going back a year now, aren't we? It seems like it had started yesterday. The China-Taiwan relationship was heavily looked at. The lens went straight there after we saw the invasion of Ukraine. What's the latest from where you are?
Yeah, remember it was August when then US Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, triggering this huge uptick in military activity, Chinese military activity around Taiwan, which still persists to this day. I mean, I get regular briefings each day at 9 a.m. in terms of notifying how many Chinese jets and Navy vessels approached that median line in the Taiwan Strait. So I guess the key developments in this relationship is those military activities still occur, and I guess there's a big uptick when there's a prominent politician visits Taiwan, or a prominent politician overseas makes some sort of statement regarding Chinese claims to Taiwan. There's a big uptick. There's more jets flying towards Taiwan. I guess the key thing that a lot of Taiwanese are watching this week is the visit from one of the opposition party's officials is in China, mainland China, and meeting with some very senior members of the Politburo there, and talking about the improving of relations between Taipei and Beijing. I guess there's a bit of talk here about how the KMT, this official, is again looking to strengthen relations between Beijing and Taipei, and I guess many believe that they're not representing Taiwanese interests. He's not representing Taiwan interests in this trip, but there is, I guess, a bit of interest from regular Taiwanese public to improve this relations, which has been quite, as you say, fraught for going back at least a year.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of the outward looking from China has got a lot to do with the way their economy is and the very precarious position it's in. Yeah,
of course, the impact from the very restrictive lockdowns has been quite stark. But I guess we're seeing some economic data out of China to say that there's been a rebound, of course. But I guess it's still lacking from the huge amount of visitors still visiting China. I guess some people are still hesitant given what they've seen in China over the last more than 2 years. So there's some positive economic metrics, I guess, that the Chinese officials are spruiking, but still a long way to go in terms of recovering and taking China's mantle. I guess some analysts have argued the notion that it's a foregone conclusion that China will become the world's biggest economy, given the significant hit it's taken due to these restrictive lockdowns.
Brent, great to chat. Fascinating what's happening in Asia, and I look forward to staying up to date.
Thanks, Tim.